Classic Vanilla, the Burning Crusade, and Wrath of the Lich King have been popular destinations for players to go back and revisit now for many years. Long before Nostarius was closed, dedicated and enthusiastic players were already trying to reverse engineer World of Warcraft and deliver Blizz-like experiences, and it was in part the popularity of these projects that would eventually lead Blizzard to think to themselves, maybe we should do this whole classic thing ourselves after all. And over the years from the original big three classic games, some of them have proven more popular than others, and Wrath of the Lich King has certainly been a mainstay for the fan scene for a considerable amount of time, perhaps even being a more popular rendition of WoW than Classic itself was for some. You could certainly argue it. And with us now getting stuck into tier 6 with potentially 10 to 12 months left of TBC, you better believe the hype train is already in motion to go back to Northrend. I plan to do plenty of content around the game myself, including the return of the Class series of course, but today I wanted to make a video to do a little bit of a warning for Wrath, a bit of a setting of expectations, some of the lessons learned from having seen how two separate re-releases have gone so far, as we do have a few trends that are repeating themselves. And with Wrath of the Lich King's popularity on fan servers, there's going to be more people than ever offering information on exactly what to expect, when and where. In fact, it makes Classic quite a strange game to cover. Usually on other titles, when you do a video, it's on new things or content that nobody really knows the answers to yet, like class balance for 9.2 or raid boss guides. For Classic, you say something that will happen and someone will inform you, actually your itemization is providing a 1.3% DPS loss over the course of a fight that takes 1.5 minutes or more, that they were top DPS on a Blood DK and ICC 25-man heroic, and you therefore have no idea what you're talking about. They were also rank 1. Presumably. There's a lot of discussions currently about what the quote-unquote best DPS is, which items should be prioritized where, what's the best raid comp, what will people use for speedrunning, how should I level the fastest? And I believe Wrath of the Lich King is shaping up to be a more complicated series of answers than either Classic or TBC were, because there were plenty of answers online to these questions for Classic and TBC too. Some were right, some were not. Expectations have been built upon fan servers and memories from when it was live, of course, and some people out there have played over half a decade straight of some of these expansions. Things that could be incorrect may have been normalized, or Blizzard will release things in an unexpected manner and say, yeah, actually this is how we think it was, this matches our reference client. Wrath of the Lich King was back from 2007 too. A lot of people played back then, raided back then, or started back then. I raided back then as well, and I have some memories of doing great DPS on a Blood DK and an Arcane Mage during the start of the expansion. Will this hold true on the re-release? Well, I think one of them will, the Mage. But at the same time, back then you were playing on what we would now call a progressive server. If something about Wrath of the Lich King starts with, I used to be, I remember, back in my day, you need to take it with a particularly large grain of salt. I feel very confident, based on Classic being 1.12 and TBC being 2.43, that Wrath of the Lich King's launch will be on the final patch balancing 3.3.5. And since then, so much has been mathed out. The motions have been gone through time and again. A tier approached fresh many times over. Guilds aiming at high rankings will have a template for everything they intend to do. The raid comp, the strategies, the loot council, but they may have all just learned the wrong lessons from fan servers when compared to whatever Blizzard puts out. Think of some of the things that were expected in Classic or TBC compared to what has happened, or entirely new things that were found that Blizzard just left in. For Classic WoW, the Warrior Trinket Diamond Flask snapshotted all of your bonus healing gear, meaning you had warriors legitimately rolling on healing items for an offset. That should have been nerfed. It was in the patch notes. It shouldn't have been on a 1.12 client, but it was, and they just left it in. Another item, the Runeblade of Baron Rivendare, also snapshotted healing for a bit, but they did nerf that, but not the Diamond Flask. Blizzard gave us the threat API for the game, the holy grail for Classic. Through this we found things like Protection Paladins can actually main tank through spamming Blessing of Kings to generate threat. It was super wonky, but hey, it worked. The PvP ranking meta ended up with Alliance players being able to pre-made for the vast majority of it, whilst Tor players sat in a really long queue. Warriors were supposed to be absolutely terrible at leveling, and yeah, they weren't great early, I'll agree with that, but once you got level 30 or so, picked up your Whirlwind Axe, they started to become really fun. For TBC, the Chicken Squawk buff activation was found. This is an engineering trinket which, after you receive any kind of hostile action, doesn't have to be damage at all. You pop the chicken and a few seconds later it will proc something called Squawk, which is 5% melee haste, and these stacked. This was something which would have completely changed everything in the classic speedrunning meta, and it was never found until midway through TBC, and now Blizzard fixed it by accident by fixing something else on Illidan, and they've just decided to leave it like that. In TBC, warrior DPS was meant to be pretty average until the start of tier 6, where armor penetration gear became more readily available. Even in tier 4, Fury was strong, and in tier 5 with the correct group, they could top the DPS. Some speedruns even went so far as to stack melee. Oh, and have you noticed you can now mount whilst you have the skeleton from Noggin Fogger active? It's just randomly happened since last patch. No idea why. I mean, I'm not complaining, but we just didn't expect that. Also, why isn't Zephyr, the NPC that teleports you to Caverns of Time from Shatrath, not in the game yet either? I mean, okay, fine, she wasn't added till the Sunwell patch originally, but it would kind of be nice since the content's relevant now. What I'm saying is, overall, a lot more is known about the game, but knowing absolutely everything, being able to predict everything, is kind of impossible. For Wrath the Lich King, fan servers often have this laser focus on ICC 25-man heroic 3.3.5 best in slot gearing for rankings. This is literally the end of the expansion after you have farmed it for months to get your bis. You'll see videos or threads pop up about who's the top DPS, and people say, oh, obviously anything that can equip Shadowmourne. Sure, it might be right for once you have Shadowmourne, but what about the entire year plus of content that comes before that? If I had a choice of a character with a legendary in World of Warcraft so far as when it came out, I'd take Glaives over a Shadowmourne any day. Glaives have Black Temple, Mount Hyjal, Zulaman, and Sunwell, where it's a relevant item that can help out your raid. And frankly, you'll probably still be using them in the opening of Wrath of the Lich King. They are just that good. Shadowmourne is super cool, not denying that, it's iconic, but for me it's the Wrath of the Lich King version of Atiesh or Thoridal. Anyways, getting back on track, there's meant to be much more change between class and spec as for who is good when in Wrath. Back in Classic, we expected warriors to be the best from day one to the end, and they were. TBC, we expected hunters and warlocks, but mages and warriors have also proven very strong, though not quite as easily stackable for most raids. For Wrath of the Lich King, if what I'm hearing at the moment ends up being correct, it will be the first time that you will actively see people plan to reroll main in different patches, or at least change their spec within their main, and the game facilitates this too through badges and its various catch-up systems. For Wrath of the Lich King early game, Fury is meant to be bad again, Arms is supposed to be average. We'll have to see what Sunwell gear has to say about this. Oh, and by the way, warriors at the moment, if you're getting duplicate two-handed items, you probably want 2 of those for when Titan's Grip comes along in the pre-patch, something to think about. Assassination rogues are meant to be incredible in tier 7 and a good consistent DPS, whilst combat rogues need more armor pen and won't come online till tier 8 or later. Enhancements meant to start off strong but falls off, as do frost decays. Arcane mages are the go-to spec early, but fire is one of the best in the game later. The ICC 25-man heroic BIS DPS lists will show you Fury fire in combat, but none of them are meant to be good early. And myself, I've done class overviews for Classic and TBC in advance, and I've looked across many different sources and experiences and tried to double and triple check and make sure that everything just makes sense for what I'm putting out, and do my best to get them as right as they possibly can be. But I think Wrath the Lich King is going to be really hard to get right, despite it arguably being more played over the years than either of the other 2 versions of the game. And I've always tried to make the class videos as an outline as for what to expect rather than an exact guide due to this, but it is difficult to do until we get our hands on the beta, until we can actually play and gear the classes for real. Will snapshotting or cooldowns and procs work as expected? Will some final patch talents or itemizations subvert expectations of what will be best? Will something totally wild and new be found that makes one spec better than we thought? It could happen. Keep an open mind for things. Overall, if you like performing well, I'd try and pick something consistent, but have that expectation you might need to change spec as the expansion progresses. This may prove true, for example, for Death Knights going from Frost early to Unholy later, or Hunters playing Survival early but going Marksman later. Above all, I don't want to try and sell an idea because I remember it being like that, or I just like the class. Back when I did the Classic Was It Any Good Though videos a long time ago, I'll always remember having done the Druid one, and during the video saying boomies are, well, not exactly gonna do great in Classic, which is what it is. I think that's fair to say. And I remember I had one commenter saying that this was wrong. He was always the top DPS in his ZG pugs. Boomies are fine. A lot of people agreed with him, saying, oh, you know, I used to do XYZ back in the day. People are just underrating this class. They don't remember how good they were. And well, we found out how that turned out. I do videos as much as I can on how I expect classes to be, not what I want them to be. Of course, this all depends on you and how much you enjoy pushing performance and playing the quote-unquote right thing. At the end of the day, there are guilds where they're not going to mind as long as you're clearing the raid and having a good time. I just don't want to create false impressions, but at the moment myself and others creating content as well are doing so on somewhat incomplete information, and that's just kind of the nature of what we deal with. So take a grain of salt with it all, though it is certainly interesting to talk about classes, and it's one of my favorite things to do in the game. That's about everything. This is just something I felt as though I needed to get off my chest in advance of future content from me and before the announcement of Wrath, especially seeing how the re-releases have gone so far and how much the player base can still relearn from Blizzard's remake of the game with the sheer volume of people being thrown at common problems. That is everything from me today though. As always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in. Let me know your thoughts on the video if anything, and I shall see you all in the next one very soon.